Hare Krishna, Rupa Raghunatha.
Hare Krishna,
Good to see you again.
You too.
Just going to ask a few questions today. Just start off, maybe you can introduce yourself.
So my name is Rupa Raghunatha. I'm a disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I joined in Sydney Temple 37 years ago. I've been up New Govardhan for the last 13 years, a resident here with family.
That's nice. How did you join Krishna consciousness? Was that in Sydney as well, or?
Perth Temple originally, but I lived near Canberra, and my brother got an insert for sending away for a free Bhagavad Gita, and we think that he got it at the Sydney Royal Show. They have these show bag pavilions where they have all these chocolates and fizzy drinks in the bags. And we think the devotees were inserting these coupons in the show bags. And we bought the show bag and he found the coupon. He thought it was something to do with astral travelling, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And he sent away and he got this copy of Bhagavad Gita, soft cover Bhagavad Gita. And he wasn't reading it for a long time. And I said, "Oh, what's that book you got? Can I have a read?" And I started reading, and I read like the preface, the introduction, and found it very interesting, very solid knowledge, but it was a little hard to understand. I guess I was a meathead at that time. It was like working on a beef farm, raising cows for slaughter.
Okay.
So probably pretty thick, And I only read sort of the introduction, and then I went travelling around Australia, and I was working on farms and factories and Bunnings and different jobs, mowing lawns. And I was heading through Queensland up to Cairns and then up to Darwin. And I was leaving Darwin after a couple of months, and I met these guys. They wanted to get a lift in my car down to Perth, and they were vegetarians. So they introduced me to vegetarian food. I'd never tried sort of vegetarian meals before. It was like meat 3 times a day as a cattle farmer. And I thought the food was really good, no vegetarian food.
What kind of food did they have back then as well?
Oh, just like, sometimes we were making our own. They cooked like just pasta and simple spaghetti, and sometimes buying like vegetarian burgers at shops. Bread and sandwiches. And then we got to Perth, and they were sort of hippies, and they introduced me to some restaurants. I don't think they were vegetarian restaurants, but they had vegetarian options, wraps and things like that. And but they were into drinking, so they were taking me to the pubs, and it was sort of like they were hippies. It was like drugs and drinking and smoking marijuana and free sex and all that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't so much. I wasn't into that really. But then we met some devotees in Fremantle, which is a suburb of Perth, and the devotees were just handing out like free books, like small books. I picked up a higher taste, and I started reading a bit of the introduction, and it made a lot of sense on the benefits of vegetarian diet. And but I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't cook any recipes. I was staying with an Indian guy, and he was cooking a lot of Indian dishes, so I got accustomed to eating Indian dishes. It wasn't vegetarian. Some of the dishes were vegetarian, some were meat. But then I had to move out of there because he had a girlfriend. He didn't want me there anymore, so I had to leave, and I went to the Backpackers. And then just after that, on the Backpackers, there was an invitation, said, free Sunday love feast, yoga, meditation, discussion on Bhagavad Gita, kirtan. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. In those days, I was like, if I get a free meal somewhere, I'd take it up. I used to sometimes go to the Salvation Army and get free meals there, but it was horrible food.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, that sounds good. Vegetarian, I'm sort of dabbling in vegetarian food, I'll check it out. So I caught the train over to Perth, and I had the address, and then I hopped off the train. I was looking for the address, and in those days you didn't have mobile phones, so you couldn't like Google the address, no maps. And I was like trying to find the address, I couldn't find it. And I was about to give up, then I found the street name, and I found the number of the street. It was just a house in the suburbs.
Okay.
And I knocked on the door, and it was just the time the Sunday Feast program was starting. I could hear like some singing, and the devotees opened the door. Come in, you're welcome. You know, like this. We're having Sunday program. Come and sit down. We're just starting. If you want to have a look, we've got all these books. They had the whole Srimad Bhagavatam set and Chaitanya Charitamrita and other books there. And I was really impressed with all the books. And I don't think I had a chance to read the books because I just went pretty much straight into the kirtan, and devotees were dancing. I think I might have just like sort of moved around a bit, not full on dancing, but I was just swaying with the devotees from side to side. At that time I had really short hair, shorter than this. I had a moustache, I had an earring, I had that was it, an earring. So it didn't worry me like the devotees with short hair, because I was already used to that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty enlivening, the kirtan, and then the class was on. And I was sitting cross-legged in the class, and I hadn't sat like that for 15 years since I was in kindergarten. I was 20 at that stage.
Right.
And I was looking around, there's no chairs in the temple. I said, why don't these people have any chairs? And I was getting a little uncomfortable. I hadn't sat like that for a long time. And I looked around, and in the back there was 3 Vyasasans. In those days there was 3 Vyasasans. There was one for Prabhupada. I can't remember if they had a murti of Prabhupada or they just had the picture. I think they had a murti. And then the other one, they had a picture of Bhavananda, who was a resident guru at that time. And the third one was empty. I thought, there's a spare chair, I'm going to use that. So I started to climb up. The devotee giving class, his name was Dvija Dev. He's now Dina Bandhu. I think he got reinitiated by Narayan Raj.
Okay.
And he immediately said, get off that chair, get off the Vyasasan. How dare you? Who do you think you are? I was like really embarrassed, in front of everyone. So I climbed down, sat on the floor again, and listened to the class, and it made a lot of sense. I seemed to understand a lot of it. I was really getting into it. And then at the end of the class, I don't think I asked questions, but then the feast was served out, and it was like amazing feast, like 10-course feast. It was like pakoras, puris, 2 sabjis, rice, dal, halava, sweet rice, sweet balls.
Yep.
And the devotees were serving out, and it was so amazing. I had seconds. They came around seconds and thirds. I ate up to the neck. I was so full.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I felt so grateful for these people who are giving such amazing food, and it's a nice program. I asked them, what can I do? Can I do something to help? And they said, yeah, you can. Here's a mop and bucket. You can mop all the floors.
Yeah.
So I mopped all the floors. And then at the end, they said, do you want to help? Do you want to take some books you can read and find out more about the philosophy? And if you want to take some books to give to people you meet. So they gave me like a whole box of small books, In those days, there was a lot of, in Australia, free book distribution.
Right.
The temples were passing out thousands of free books every
Wow.
weekend. We'd sell paraphernalia during the week to make money to support the temple and give to the BBT. And then on Saturday, Sunday, each temple would give out 5,000 or 6,000 books.
Gee.
Most devotees would go out, for a few hours. Some of us stay out all day giving out. I used to give out 1,000 books, like every weekend, just free books. So they gave me a box of books, and wherever I was working, I was doing a lot of gardening for people. I'd give them a book, like just a free book, High Taste and Chant and Be Happy, or Coming Back, Yoga for New.
These are smaller books?
Perfection of Yoga, small books.
Not Bhagavad Gita or...
Wasn't giving those out for free.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was going to the temple for about 4 weeks, and I started going every day, actually, pretty much after the first Sunday feast. I started going every day for morning program. I go out to work, and I go to the restaurant downtown Perth for lunch.
What were you doing for work?
Just mainly gardening, sometimes packaging like alfalfa sprouts in factories, stuff like that. And one day I got a job because there was a place called Workforce 80 where they had all these jobs on the board. You just pick whatever job you want, and some jobs went all day, some jobs were a few hours. And it was like cash in the hand.
Right.
And one job was like working in a slaughterhouse for a day. And I thought, I want to find out, what it's really like for the animals, Even though I was raised on a cattle farm, I never went to a slaughterhouse. So I went and worked there. This was after I met the devotees. So I worked there for a day, and it was like hell, it was horrific. Like animals, it was pig slaughterhouse. Animals screaming like all day long, like men, like they'd come in, and men like shooting them, and killing them and then like cutting their body to pieces, and I was at the end, had to slide the dead body into the freezer, you know. I said, I'm never going to do this again, you know.
Oh.
And they paid me, and I said, that's it, never going to
Wow.
work in a place like that again, you know. So that
Yeah.
really convinced me that, yeah, I've got to be totally vegetarian. I never want to eat meat again, you know.
Wow.
So then I started going to the temple every day, breakfast, lunch and dinner,
Mm-hmm.
eating up to the neck. I could hardly sleep at night. I had like I remember I had a stitch in my side like every night.
So far, the best vegetarian food you've had?
Yeah, and
That-
yeah, it was just out of this world, and just was better and better every time, as prasadam is, right?
Yeah.
Always gets better.
Yeah.
And I'd take a lot of the prasadam home to the people I'd met in the backpackers. So I'd take containers of sweet rice and halava and sabji every day to them, hand it
Yeah.
out. And then the devotees said they're going travelling like Sankirtan. They're going to go and book distribution, Harinam, like south of Perth, some of the towns. And I went with them. We camped out in caravan parks for a few nights, and I was just giving out free books and free Bhakti Guideheads and joining along with the Harinam. And sometimes I'd meet like Christians and they'd argue with me, and I'd like
Mm.
try and argue with them about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness.
Mm.
And then after 4 weeks I had to come back because my parents had organised the 21st birthday party for me back in New South Wales, near Canberra. And so they really wanted me back after a year and a half I'd been away. So the devotees gave me some bread rolls and a jar of jam to take with me. And they didn't really train me how to offer food. And so I thought, 3 days driving across the Nullarbor, I picked up a couple of hitchhikers and they shared the petrol and everything. And I said to myself, I'm not going to eat any food apart from these bread rolls and jam because I don't know how to offer the food. So for 3 days I lived on water, bread rolls and jam, no butter.
Wow.
And they weren't vegetarian, they were just buying everything at the service station. And we drove, and I had the devotees gave me one cassette. In those days we had cassettes, and it was of Bhagavan. He was one of the spiritual masters, one of the original gurus.
Yeah.
And he had a really good voice, so I just played that over and over again.
Was it bhajans or like lecture or?
They were bhajans, just bhajans. And I actually lost that cassette years ago, but I picked a CD. Devotee had a CD of it recently, and they gave it to me. Anyway, so those two people in the car were saying, haven't you got anything else you can play, you know, instead of this Hare Krishna stuff? I said, okay, here's a Rolling Stones or Beatles like cassette, and I put it in for like 2 minutes, and I say, no, I'm not going to hear any more of that. You just have to listen to what I'm listening to. This is my car, you know. So for a whole 3 days, they were just listening to
That's great.
bhajans. We got to Adelaide, we went to the Adelaide Temple for Sunday feast. It was a big, like, Victorian style building from the 1850s or something, beautiful building. They didn't own it, they were just renting it. But I went to Sunday feast, and that was a very wonderful Sunday feast, and I took those two backpackers there
that's
with
good.
me.
Yeah.
And then one of them got out in Adelaide, and the other one came with me up to, there was a farm like near Mildura, which is north of Adelaide, long way north. It was like 20,000 acre farm, New Gaudadesh. We went out there to have a look. We arrived at breakfast time. We had breakfast. The temple president, Krodeshwara, Prabhu, Prabhu disciple, he drove us around the farm. We only stayed a short time. Then I went to Melbourne with this backpacker and they got out there in Melbourne, and I tried to find the temple in Melbourne, but for some reason I couldn't find it. Then I drove back to my parents' place in New South Wales. And I had a lot of the books, so when I got home, it was getting close to my 21st birthday party, but I had time to visit Sydney beforehand, and I went to visit the temple in North Sydney, which had just opened like a year before that, in '85. And I really liked the temple there, met the devotees, and I decided this is where I'm going to join.
The same Rupa Raghunatha temple that's there now?
Yeah. Well, in those days it was just picture. It was a picture of Panchatattva.
Wow.
Radha Gopinath were in Darlinghurst Temple, and Radha Gokulananda were out at Kola River Farm, Western Sydney.
Right, yeah.
And then later on, Radha Gokulananda came and were installed in North Sydney, and then a bit later they went up to New Gokul, and then Radha Gopinath came from Darlinghurst Temple to North Sydney.
Okay.
So when I joined, it was just a picture of Panchatattva.
Oh.
And Dineshwara was there, and I don't know if you know Bojadev, he lives in town. His son works on the buildings over here, and what's his name? Works with mantra.
Michael or Malcolm something?
No, he's got a devotee name.
Oh.
Anyway, it'll come to me. Anyway, so I went to the temple to visit. I went to the restaurant there. I really liked the prasad, and I decided this is it. After my 21st birthday party, I'm going to join here, because it's close to my parents and home. And then I went back to my parents' place and
In Canberra? Or?
near Canberra on a farm like 1 hour east of Canberra. And I was reading all the books, and they were seeing me reading Hare Krishna books, so they knew I was into this Hare Krishna stuff. And I gave Mum the higher taste. She was cooking recipes out of the higher taste.
Should we cook like vegetarian food for you?
Vegetarian recipes out of the higher taste.
Wow.
And so I was pretty much just eating vegetarian. Maybe I had a bit of meat just to, because my mum was cooking it. And then they gave me a new Subaru station wagon for my 21st birthday. And before that I just had a Holden station wagon. And then all the friends came for the 21st birthday party, and I was trying not to drink because I hadn't drunk alcohol for like 4 weeks. I was with the devotees. And I thought, I have to drink a couple of drinks because just to be social, fit in.
Yeah.
And then I woke up the next morning with this like horrible headache, and I said, what happened? I only drank two drinks of beer and got this horrible headache as if I drank lots of alcohol.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember the last part of the night. And I went to the bathroom and looked at my face in the mirror, and my so-called friends had shaved one of my eyebrows off in my sleep.
Wow.
So then my only thought was that someone spiked my drink, put a sleeping pill in the drink, and they knocked me out and put me to bed and shaved my eyebrow off, So then the next day all the friends left, and that night I said to Mum and Dad, I'm going to Sydney, I'm driving to Sydney tonight after dinner. And my plan was to go to the temple.
Yeah.
My mum and dad had a flat they owned from a few years before in North Sydney, right near the temple there, just 5 minutes drive. And they said, okay, well, you can stay in the flat,
Yeah.
And he threatened me, he said, if you get involved with those Hare Krishnas, you won't be welcome home.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's my
Yeah.
business, that's my free will, So I took off like 7 o'clock after dinner, drove 4 hours drive, got there at 11 o'clock, stayed in the flat. Mum gave me the leftover cheesecake from the party.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I'm not going to eat that cheesecake, it's got eggs in it, So I just left it in the fridge. I went to the temple the next morning.
With your one eyebrow?
Yeah, and the devotees saying, what happened? I told them what happened at the party, and they were like all laughing at me. I just started going to the temple for a few days, and after a few days I said, that's it, I want to move in. In those days, you could just move in straight away. You could put on a saffron robe straight away, move into the brahmachari ashram. So after a few days I said, I want to join. They said, okay, you can join, move in, and here's some saffron robes for you. So I moved in, and then a few weeks later my parents came to visit me. That's right, I rang them up the day I joined and said, guess what? And they said, what? I've joined the Hare Krishnas. And Mum starts crying on the phone,
Out of happiness or out of...
No, out of...
Okay.
They were really upset.
Oh, no.
And they said, we wanted you to come and manage the farm, and, it's a strange cult, and we've spent so much time choosing that car for you, now you've joined the Hare Krishnas. It's like you've disowned us. And I said, well, you can come and visit me. So a few weeks later they came to visit me, and I was in saffron robes and still had my hair, longer hair by then.
Yeah.
And Dad's looking around, all the shaved heads. You better not shave your head like those guys, you'll break your mother's heart, So the next time they came a few weeks later, I had a freshly shaved head, tilak. And then from the day I joined, basically, pretty soon after, a few days after, they had me going out like on Sankirtan, like collecting, a lot of collecting during the week. We'd sell perfumes, we'd sell paintings, we'd sell like t-shirts, candles, incense, different things we'd sell, all sorts of paraphernalia to raise money for the temple and to give to the BBT, and to give to Mayapur and different projects. And then on the weekend we give out all the books. And some devotees were selling books as well. And so, that was my sort of main service, going out Sankirtan, selling paraphernalia, giving out the books, going out the Harinam. Saturday night was big Harinam. We had 2 temples back then. We had Darlinghurst Temple and North Sydney Temple. Each temple there was like 100 devotees in each.
Wow.
A lot of there's probably in each temple was 20 or 30 brahmacharis and same brahmacharinis, and then a whole lot of householders.
Wow.
And we joined forces every Saturday night for a big Harinam, like 70, 80, 100 devotees downtown Sydney.
Oh, wow.
We'd have a big feast, Saturday night feast, like pizza, cake, ice cream.
Yeah. Where would you have the feast?
Pasta. Well, we alternated. So one week, North Sydney Temple did the feast, and all the devotees from Darlinghurst came and had the feast with us. Then we all went out in Harinam together.
Yeah.
And then the next feast, next week, we go and they cook the feast over there, and we'd go for the feast, then go out in Harinam.
So you ate first and then you went out?
Yeah.
No one was like, oh, this is too much, you can't go anymore?
No,
You think it's the opposite?
We were sort of, there was a pressure to go out, that everyone should go out as much as possible,
That's
except
good.
for the Bajari, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, we ate so much, pizza, pasta, ice cream, cake, we'd be so full that we'd just go and dance it off, you know, dance the whole time.
Yeah.
Even in the middle of winter, like, we wouldn't wear a jumper because you get so hot from dancing. Even in the middle of winter, we just dance the whole time, spinning around, jumping up and down.
Wow.
And so that was every week, Harinam, big Harinam, George Street, Pitt Street, down to Chinatown, all around. And sometimes we dance in one spot, certain places. One place was Hoyt's, the movie theatre, because lots of people Saturday night going in and out of the movies.
Yeah.
So we danced there for a long time. Hari Suri used to spend a long time in North Sydney Temple, and he'd sometimes lead the Harinam. He had like a booming voice, you know. And one time I was like,
Just curious, back then, how was like the mic set up?
we didn't have mics in those
just
days.
singing.
It was just devotees had to like chant as loud as they could, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. And one time we were dancing like, you know, like we do sometimes up and back and forward like that.
Yeah.
And then I was like spinning around with other devotees in circles, or arms locked spinning around. And then like came back to, you know, mundane reality, and I looked ahead, and who was there but my mother, father, brother and sister? They're all like looking with real sour faces, you know. What's our brother, what's our son doing, you know?
Yeah.
I went over and gave them a hug, and then went back to dancing, you know.
Yeah.
And after a while they just walked off.
Oh, wow.
So, but my parents used to come because they had their flat near the temple. They used to come like every few weeks. They'd come and visit me. They liked the prasadam.
Yeah.
And they'd quite often come for dinner. And I started
At the temple?
There was a restaurant in the temple there, and sometimes I'd take them to go vendors for dinner there. And Mum used to sometimes stay. Dad wouldn't always stay, but Mum would stay sometimes talking to me till 9 o'clock at night, and then I'd give her some mahaprasad like puris and curd and eggplant sabji. And but they never really got used to the whole brahmachari thing.
Yeah.
But they used to come regularly, and then my mum started coming for classes. Actually, before that, they got some deprogrammers on me.
Yeah.
Like after about 8 years.
Wow.
I used to go travelling sometimes. I'd visit them and stay a few nights and do Sankirtan in different towns, come back and cook for them. And I used to say, well, I'll stay with you for a few days or a week, only if you're vegetarian for the time I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, they're big meat eaters. And then they said, one time I said, I'll come visit you. And I got there and they said, oh, we've got some friends from America, they'd like to talk to you. And I didn't know who they were. And these two guys came around. And they were friendly at first. Then they started saying how they'd been in this spiritual organisation, Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi, and they found these different groups who were like bogus, you know. Then they started like attacking ISKCON, criticising ISKCON, and then they pulled out all of like a whole lot of Prabhupada's letters they had like printed out on these sheets, and they started saying, what about your spiritual master? He said man didn't go to the moon. This is bogus. We don't believe that, you know. Man did go to the moon, you know. And then they said, what about your spiritual master said that, you know, woman's brain is like smaller than a man's brain. We don't believe in that, you know. So they were criticising this and that. And then my mum and dad said, these people, they're here to help you, you know. And your brother's turning up soon. My brother turned up that day with his wife, and my sister with her husband. And then they wanted me to stay there for 3 days and have talks with these guys. And I realised that these guys are deprogrammers, you know.
Yeah.
And after half an hour, I thought, I had the whole Bhagavatam set in the house there, and I thought I'm just going to like pull out quotes from the Bhagavatam and try and defeat these guys, but they wouldn't listen. I realised they're getting paid big money, you know.
Yeah.
Parents are paying them big money to be here. And after half an hour, I thought, I'm hungry. So I said, I'm going to cook something. I went to the kitchen and cooked rice, sabji and halva.
Yeah.
I came back after an hour and said, is anyone hungry or anyone like to try some? None of the family wanted to try it.
Oh.
The deprogrammers, they said, oh, we'll try some. We go to your restaurants in America. So they were just doing it for the money, even though they go to our restaurants.
Yeah.
And so we had talks the rest of the day. At the end of the day, I thought, this is useless now. These guys are not going to listen to me. And then I said, I'm going to bed about 8 o'clock. And it was right at the end of the year, and like the next day or two, the summer festival was starting at New Govardhan. We used to come from all the temples around Australia, come to the summer festival, 3 or 4 day festival, big kirtans, lots of classes, seminars, we go on Harinams, Rath Yatra, you know. And then Mum and my sister came to the room and said, oh, they've got some movies they want to show you, you know. So I thought, the inquisitiveness got the better of me, so I thought, okay, I'll just watch the movies, see what they're about. One was on the Catholic Church, how that was brainwashing. The next one was on the army and how that's brainwashing. And the next one was all about New Vrindavan and what happened there, the scandals that happened there. And I thought, no, that's enough. I don't want to see any more, hear any more. I'm not staying for the next 2 days, so I just said I'm going to bed. I didn't tell them I was leaving the next morning, but I got up like 4 o'clock and just jumped in the car and drove like 11 and 12 hours to get here, you know. And
To get back to Sydney?
no, I drove straight through Sydney up to New Govardhan for the festival that was happening here.
This is the first time you went to New Govardhan?
No,
Or
I've been to the
traveling
summer
around
festival a couple of years before that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, after that my mum started coming to the temple because she realised that my son's very determined in what he's doing. We're not going to get him out of it easily. She wanted to find out what the philosophy was. She started reading all the Bhagavatams. She read up to the 5th canto. She read the Bhagavad Gita. She read Hari Suri's book. She met Hari Suri in Sydney and she praised him for his diaries. She said they're the best Hare Krishna books I've read.
Wow.
And she started to come to Bhagavatam classes in Sydney. Like, you know, every time she was in Sydney, she'd come 2 or 3 mornings in a row.
Yeah.
But she always had a bit of an angle of trying to find faults with the philosophy, and the devotees, they'd always defeat her. And Upram Prabhu was the temple president at the time in Sydney. One time she put her hand up. She'd always be the first person to put her hand up in class. She had written notes down, things she wanted to ask. I used to get a chair for her to sit in. I'd put a mat under her feet, you know, and sit next to her on the mat. And so she asked a question to Upram, and he was just like stirring her a bit. So he said, yes, Mrs. Rupa. She didn't like that at all, you know.
Oh, okay.
She was really upset with that. But afterwards, Upram had a talk with her, and they became friends, you know. They had a hug with each other.
Okay. That's nice.
So she tried the deprogrammer thing once more. She brought them to Sydney, and she told me they're in Sydney, they'd like to have more talks with you. And I spoke to Upram, and he said, just get out of here, go travelling, you know, go travelling Sankirtan. Ring up when you're 3 hours away, tell your mum, you know, you've gone travelling. And Upram said, tell your mum to bring them round to me, you know. So she brought them round to him one morning, and he just like smashed them philosophically, and she never tried after that again. So basically brahmachari for 20 years then in the temple there, a lot of travelling Sankirtan most of the time, deity worship, Harinam, and then I got married, and after a few years being Grihastha in Sydney, I moved up here. I never thought I was going to get married. The spiritual master encouraged me to stay brahmachari.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Like back in those days when you joined the temple and you took on saffron, there was a reason you took on saffron was like, okay, being a Hare Krishna means you're a brahmachari.
Yeah, anyone who joins first, if they want to live in the temple, they put everyone put on saffron. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you only put on white if you were going to get married.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my spiritual master, he said, if you want to get married, then consult me first. Yeah. But he passed away before I decided to get married.
Okay.
So then Upram was joking with me. He said, well, you can't get married now because you can't consult your spiritual master anymore. He's not here. But anyway, it happened. Yeah. And that's a different story.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Nandu.
Hopefully, I mean, there's always should be a part 2 with all of these, but you know, see how it goes. Thanks so much. Hare Krishna.
Thanks for your time, and Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada.
All glories to Prabhupada.
Doing the service. Nice service.
All glories to your service. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.